So hi, welcome to Confounded TV. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have our conversation today.
Oh, I'm super excited. I have some show notes here, which everybody can read down below on YouTube, or they'll be on Spotify. This is amazing, this career, I think. You were on the internet in 1995, and you founded, and you're a CTO of Webgirls International, which started with 6 women in New York City in 95, and now has 100 chapters, of which you're the leader of the New York chapter, and 30,000 members. Not only that, you're the founder of TechSpeak for Entrepreneurs, which I love because you do workshops to help founders understand, if they're non-technical, how to deal with their technology teams and their projects. And then not only that, you do the workshops and the seminar teaching, and you do blogging, and also you've been featured as a tech expert in Inc. Magazine, NBC's Today Show, Fast Company Magazine, Newsy.com, O'Reilly, Smart Money, Small Biz, and Tech Republic's Women's Radio. That sounds like a lot of work.
Keeps me busy.
And before we came on, you were talking about it's actually a lot of this is about delegation and planning of time.
Yes, I'm very, very mindful about how I structure my days. I have, number one, the top 3 things that have to get done in a day that are the most important, that could be blockers for other people on my team. And so I am very intentional on getting those done first before the rest of the madness happens for the day.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that is really important, as we talked about, is delegating and trusting your team to actually make decisions for you. We have a culture of learn early, learn often, learn cheap. In the lean startup philosophy, it's fail early, fail often, fail cheap. I kind of flip that around a little bit because I feel like we are reframing failure every day as a learning opportunity. So it's really important for us to have that mindset and be okay with it. And so we just earlier talked about how is it that you can trust a team member to be able to run with
just
things.
To let go.
Yeah, just let go with it. And it's because just like in lean philosophy, we work on projects and we try to take these big, large, giant projects and break them into smaller pieces. So if something doesn't work out, it's not a big deal. We didn't lose a lot of time, we didn't lose a lot of energy, or it doesn't cost us too much. So from one aspect of things, people know that because we're learning early and often, it's okay to, for things to not work out.
You can relax. You can lean into it and relax.
Exactly.
Right?
You can lean into it because there's learning on the other side.
Yes.
And so people feel empowered with that. And, I never reprimand somebody if somebody made a mistake. The question is always, what did we learn from it? How can
unless they buy the wrong biscuits, right? Because that's just fundamentally wrong, right? If you don't buy the milk chocolate digestive biscuits in Britain, you've got no chance. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I did a bit of consultancy for big companies, and those grand projets are dangerous. Like the 6-month cycle to get something delivered. I've never seen one actually work. And what you're saying is the little iterative changes to something is a lot easier. It's cheaper. If you make a mistake, you move on. And also, it isn't really a mistake if you do these little iterative things. It's like experiment. And, that is good and that's bad. It's hard to sort of fail in the smaller iterative pieces of work, isn't it?
Well, it's so true, because I think when you bring it down to decision making on a daily basis, we have to make thousands of different decisions, and some of them are really, really complex, and you can be paralyzed trying to make a good decision. But what is a good decision? A good decision is one that's made really fast. And so when you take the fail early, fail often, fail cheap approach, or learn early, learn often, learn cheap approach, then you can actually, by breaking the project into smaller pieces, and using this iterative approach, you can actually, with every single failure or learning opportunity, you're actually getting more data to inform you on whether you're headed in the right direction. So you never feel stress about the decision that you're making. That's actually a positive thing, because all along the way, you're learning new things, and then you let data and what you're learning inform the next thing that you're going to do.
Okay, I guess the analogy can be like, I'm going to move house. You're not going to go, I'm going to move house, and that's it. right, decision made, you tend to go, where would I live, and how much would this house be worth, and how we're going to get the mortgage, and there's probably a lot of decisions to make before you actually go, okay, and jump. And you see that with software dev, and this will come back to this, like the qualities of a CTO and the learnings you've got to share there. And of course, for technical people, things are naturally broken down into smaller chunks, because you don't just sit down and like write one big block of Java or C# or whatever to build an application. You work out all the different pieces and you move them. So for technical people, that's easier. Whereas a founder, especially an ideative founder who just goes, "I've got an idea," and raises some money, they just see the end.
Right. Well, that's I'm going to correct you a little bit there with
that's what you're here for, right? I don't know anything. Remember?
With the developers mindset, yes, the way that we think is very logical, because I'm a developer. I know exactly how developers think. It's very logical. You can take this big problem and you can break it down into smaller chunks so you can solve it, right? Because the smaller problem is much easier to solve than one bigger problem. But when it comes to process and working in smaller chunks and iterating that way, developers are not actually trained to think that way. In fact, developers are not process oriented at all. All they want to do is write code. They want to solve their problem and they want to play in their sandbox rather than trying to figure out, is this good for the customer? Is this feature going to move the needle forward from a business perspective? And so that's why it's such an important thing for founders to understand developers and understand how to communicate that aspect of the business side, the customer side, to the developer.
It's really hard.
Exactly. It's really hard. And if you don't know how to do it properly, you're never going to be able to build an efficient product that does exactly what you want and that customers will love.
Because it's the customer, right? So you're building a booking engine for, I don't know, COVID-free pubs, right? And you've never been in a pub, and you don't go to the pub, and you don't really know the first rules of COVID. And I'll write this software because that's going to solve their problem. And then you go and see them. The problem isn't actually that bit of it. The problem's something over here. And you can build. I mean, I did this with Carson. We built stuff that we thought, this is a really good idea. Car dealers couldn't have cared less. And
exactly.
If you just asked first and then tried to build a little bit of that, you would have gone step, and built something better. So some things we did work really well, and some things didn't at all. Exactly.
And sometimes when you plan this big project, you can we iterate in small releases, right? So the release that you're working on right now is set. This is in agile development, is set and cannot be changed. But everything else can be moved around. So the feature that you thought might be really, really important, that's in your project roadmap, can be moved, because as you release something to the customers, they go really crazy about that, and you realize that the next thing you need to build is something that you didn't even think about, or something that you planned for much later. And so this gives you a lot of flexibility in how you service the customer and do it based on what you learn. Which
it's not even just technology, though, is it? Because like Airbnb was ticking along nicely, and then took better quality photographs, and then that was the rocket ship. And it was actually we'll just test better photographs. We think that's a problem. And then it ended up being, actually, we need a global network of photographers.
But they did. Funny enough, you bring that as a use case. They actually did use the lean methodologies to test out the concept. So instead of rolling out, they had a hunch that by putting
they did it themselves, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They did it themselves for a month, and they figured out all the issues around it, and they actually tested to see if bookings would go up.
Yeah.
So they ran the experiment, and it worked. I think it was at least double or triple in efficiency.
It was amazing,
Right. And then they rolled out to the rest of the company. But if you start to think that way, it's not a process. Lean and agile thinking is not a process just for software development. It's a process for the way that I personally live my life, right? It's the way that I run teams. It's the way that I run marketing and sales and business development. Figure out a way to take a bigger project and break it into smaller pieces and figure out what experiment can I set up to see if I'm headed in the right direction. right?
It's really quite hard though.
You're minimizing your mistakes.
And this is why your seminars are really interesting, and the course you run, right? Because you could certainly argue. I think the last time I built a website was 2000 and something, later than you were on the internet, but it's a start. And I built my first one. I learned MySQL, put a couple of million records in, built search in the top, and all that great stuff. So I'm not completely not techie, but you're 100% right, because I would go, this is the thing, let's build this thing, and actually it's a real struggle to row that back into what are the tests that validate the first step on that journey. Not even forget the stuff further down. Will people do X test?
Yeah,
and it's actually really
in my process, writing code is step number 8. If you think about the 10-step process, there's 7 steps that you do before step number 8.
Tell us, what are the 10 steps? I've got you there, right? Okay, all 10 steps. Let's go. Number 1.
So the first one is you validate, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about how we fall in love with our idea, and the more we think about
the better
our
it gets.
ideas, the more you fall in love with it. The more you work on it, the more you fall in love with it. Because that on the flip side, you are thinking about all the investment that you've made in it already, and you don't want to admit, in your head, that you don't want to also admit that this could be headed in the wrong direction. So you kind of have to separate yourself from how good your idea is and almost make it like a scientific experiment.
Yeah, that's pretty hard, because ideas are much more fun.
Exactly. So in the validate stage, you don't want to even think about writing code. The idea is to try to figure out whether it's a brand new feature or a brand new product, right? It doesn't have to be like every single idea that I work with has to go through this validation process.
Yeah.
And so the key there is to refine it so that it's whatever you often think the way that it should be built, or the way that you're thinking about it, is not necessarily 100% the way that the rest of the population thinks about it, right? So the goal is to find and make sure that it's a level 10 and 11 problem. So the first step is to validate. The second step is to prototype.
Yeah.
And no, we're not writing code. The prototyping is building an interactive version of your project, right? A possible solution. And you're not writing code, you're creating this interactive product that can be loaded on your mobile device or a tablet, and then you can show it to customers and validate further whether or not you've got the solution. Right.
Measure the excitement level as they go. That's
exactly. Or figure out how to refine the usability issues, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you put the buttons in the wrong place, or it's totally confusing to users. With one of my clients, we did this. We got it right on the 3rd time. So the first time we showed it to our solution to customers, and they were like, no, totally got it wrong. Second time we got there about 50% of the time. And then the 3rd time we already, it started resonating. People asked us further questions. So we knew that we can move forward.
There's some momentum going there.
Yeah.
Don't you exactly. You must find the internet deeply frustrating. I see stuff when you click through, and then on your phone, if you scroll up and it loses the bottom and the top doesn't work, and you're like, who does this? And this isn't like somebody in a garage knocking together an app. This is expensive, very big businesses. And you're like, how can you pass this on an average iPhone 11? I can't log out because the logout button's hidden behind the scroll thing. Right. So using the internet for something like you must drive you insane.
I see this all the time. Because it's what I do every day. I notice these things, and the reason why that often happens is that this is really important to know if you want to build an app, or if you're thinking of one, is the maintenance part of it. So you build your first version, could be on a totally different iPhone version, and then every single release, the iPhone can change, and so you are responsible for maintaining this thing that you built on all of the devices. So oftentimes, if the phone that you're using or the device that you're using is not the exact dimensions that you built the original app for, and you didn't make any modifications, that's when you can start to see those type of problems. So yeah, it's a big commitment because you have to maintain it on a regular basis.
And I know we should go to number 3, but I have to go back in time, because there's not many many of us have been knocking around the internet since pre-2000. Not really. There's a lot of people say they were, but really they just had a job and somebody gave them a computer. So, like 95, I'm thinking back here and thinking, okay, 98, I think it was. I quit my job in London and then got the train home, and that was it. I had no job. I just couldn't work in the city and do button pressing for no reason. And then I went and knocked on every door in the town I lived in and said, would you like a website? I can build these websites. And they were like, what for? Like, and literally knocked at every single business door in this town of about 50,000 people, and everyone said no. And then one guy said yes, and we ended up in business for something like 12 or 13, maybe even a bit longer years. In 95, I'm trying to think back, that's pre-Yahoo probably, isn't it? Or just...
Yeah, so in 95, the web was not what we know it as now, very interactive. It was pretty much just a web page with text.
Yeah, and shiny GIFs, right?
Yeah, there was no places really, and links, but there was no, maybe images also, but no videos, no way to comment or like or interact with anything or order online. So it was very, very flat.
Well before that.
Yeah.
It was a sort of library of some weird, and mostly men collecting pictures of stuff that was really boring, like there's a tractor wheel from a Ford, whatever. Because I'm fascinated how you sat in 95, and then sort of 6 of you got together and said, not only is this internet thing really fascinating and we see there's a future in this, but you also founded, like Webgirls. Was it called Webgirls back then?
So I actually didn't found Webgirls. So I joined them in 97. So they started in 95. Okay. I joined them in 97. But the origin story was these 6 women met, funny enough, in an internet cafe,
obviously,
in New York City, and they started talking about this thing called the internet and how fun it was, and nobody knew where it was going to go, but it was intriguing enough that they said, oh, we should meet. This was so much fun. Let's meet again next month and invite some friends. And, people did. And so it went from 6 to 30 to then 50, and it just blew up.
But, I mean, how did it? It blew up back then?
Yeah, it blew up back then because people got really excited about the possibilities of it.
I mean, it could just be the UK was a few years behind, so my 95 is very different to yours.
Yeah,
you probably had high-speed internet, and the stuff was coming out of the West Coast that would excite everyone, right? Whereas we were over here going, oh, does it power a tractor? That's got a terrible accent there. I'm going to get a lot of trouble for that one. And so, but in 97 then, and you came into it, this was the days of the static web page with the blinking GIFs.
Yeah. So in 97, we already had a community that we built
online
called it Town Hall. Yes, it was. It had chats and communications and all that. It was. Now that I look back at it, it was so innovative to be able to have that kind of stuff. It was all running in a web browser. It was awesome. It was the community that was offered.
Here's a question for you. Here's a trick question. We talk now about the iPhones changing, but you, like me, must remember Internet Explorer versus, I'm trying to think what it was at the time, a Netscape Navigator.
Netscape, yes. Netscape and Internet Explorer.
And then all of a sudden, Internet Explorer got weirder and weirder and harder and harder. And to the time it got to Internet Explorer 6, I think at that point I gave up actually and said, sod it, if you've got Internet Explorer 6, you're just going to have to put up with the site breaking because it was getting expensive.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing now, right? Probably is a lot of that.
So I mean, now if you're a business and you have an app, you probably need to have a web version of it as well, depending on what you're doing. Just like, for example, if you think about Twitter, they have a web app, they have a mobile app, which is an iOS device and an Android device. I don't know if they support Windows. They probably do because they have a big enough team. But that's already 4 different types of development teams that you have to have and support support the infrastructure of. And the development languages, the programming languages are different for all different platforms. So you can't even have one development team work on all of the different platforms. You have to have, if they're native applications, they are all using different programming languages. And there's way around that I teach at TechSpeak, just so that people understand that, you can build once and kind of release everywhere, but those are never, if that's your business, it's not a long-term solution.
You're really not selling the job of the CTO to me here. It just sounds like a nightmare. So,
oh no, this the CTO job is really fun because you're constantly solving problems and coming up with solutions. And to me, it's a lot of fun. I guess depending on who you are
and personality type thing here,
personality type is very, very important for a CTO.
I'd like to cover some of that because one of the things that you talk about is the quality of the CEO. I think we should.
Should we finish the steps? Do you want to finish those steps?
Number 3, yeah.
Okay, so number 3. So we talked about validate, prototype, and the third step is technical specifications. So this is where you determine how you're going to build something. So this is where you then start to write the explanations of what you're going to build and how you're going to build it.
Yeah.
And this is the starting point for defining the criteria so that there's no miscommunications. If you don't have technical specifications, everyone's going to be thinking that different things in their mind, and that's where a lot of the mistakes, very expensive mistakes, happen.
That's really logical. That's like building a car without a schematic, right? You're not going to do that.
A lot of people skip that step, and
really?
Yes, they do, or they don't define it properly, right?
Okay.
So there's many different ways and levels of doing it. So you can do it on a high level. So most people do it probably on a high level, but the more detailed the requirements, the better, right? Because there's fewer miscommunications, the better and faster you can actually execute because everybody's on the same page.
And less technical debt in the future when you have to try and fix the mistakes you all made.
Exactly. Yeah. So the fourth step is to then pick the tools and the technologies that you're going to use and then add that to your technical specifications. So the way that I approach it, again, lean and agile methodologies, is how can you get the product out the fastest? And that oftentimes means that we use third-party tools, different APIs available, maybe no-code tools. There's lots of tools that are available, third-party solutions, and how do you combine that with some hybrid custom coding rather than custom coding the whole thing yourself?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And most developers don't think like that because they love writing code. So they'll always recommend a custom solution for you.
We'll build it all from scratch.
Yeah, especially if it's a freelance developer or an agency that you're working with, right? They make their money by building stuff for you. And so that's why it's so important for entrepreneurs to know what their options are, because then they can require that in their conversations, right? That's why I'm teaching that.
This is gold here, isn't it? So the entrepreneur, if they understand this, they don't get led down the garden path of we must build this very complicated thing from scratch. It will take me 400 days at $1,000 a day. Whereas actually some of this, whether a library, no code or API form will already exist. Like what, you wouldn't build a mapping engine now. You would just use Google Maps as
exactly. That's exactly right. So I think I teach entrepreneurs all of this stuff. Brilliant. So that they are then empowered to know what they don't know, to ask the right questions, to intervene and be a part of the discussions rather than blindly trusting the professionals to make all the decisions. And then when the relationship doesn't work out or it ends, then they discover all of the decisions and how they were all not in their favor.
Yeah. I have an acquaintance. He probably doesn't listen to this. And he's a very smart developer. And he's effectively over 20 years built himself a library of software tools, right? He gets new gig, plug this together, write the code that joins it all up. That's going to take 40 days, isn't it? Yeah. and that's how he manages to run lots of projects at the same time and have many more cars than me.
Yeah. So, knowing all of this stuff is really important to be able to control. That's brilliant, I think. The fifth step is to determine the price and budget. Yeah. Because here again, going back to, so this is all tied with the requirements and picking the right tools and the technologies, but how you're going to implement something. So the UI of some of it is more complex than others. How much you're going to build, the front end versus the back end. All of those decisions are going to determine how much things cost. Believe it or not, a $10,000 project and a $50,000 project estimate for the same exact project could be completely legitimate, because depending on how you structure and what you build and how you build it, you can pay 10,000 and be okay with it, or you can also pay 50,000 and be okay with it. And so here I teach people how to understand what goes into pricing and budgeting, and so that they can then require, instead of saying how much is this going to cost to the developer, they can say, this is my budget, let's figure out what can we build with that. So it's a very different kind of mentality for that.
But it's educational. Otherwise, you are just relying on whatever you get told. Right.
Exactly. It's all about having the control and being a part of the discussion for me. Yeah. Okay. So the sixth step is where you can start to hire a developer, but not for coding. You are hiring them so that they can help you estimate the functionality. So now in the fifth step, you're also determining what your MVP will be. So the minimal viable product. So you can have 20 different features, but you decide that you're going to only build the 5 as your MVP. And so now you are hiring a team to help you estimate what that's actually going to cost. Because before we did budgeting estimation, and now we're actually going through the details and saying
work estimation.
Work estimation, exactly. And so you're hiring the developers for that. And step number 7 is you hiring a designer to design your MVP. And then you go to step number 8, which is where you are writing code.
That is amazing. That really is. When you break it out like that, because it all makes sense to me thinking backwards, but nobody told me that when I started.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing, right?
Yeah, and if anybody's interested in learning more and dive deeper into the steps and find out what the rest of the 2 steps are, they can go to TechSpeakForEntrepreneurs.com and scroll down to the bottom. And there's a free video course there that they can.
And it'll be here somewhere, and it'll also be in the show notes. Yeah. Because I've actually got good enough with Final Cut Pro to now put slidey stuff in, so we can have like 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll look awesome, and then I'll have 9 and 10 paid for access.
It's actually free, so you can go in and check it out. I was
just creating the demand for you there, and the expectation that people would actually have to pay for the magic secrets of 9 and 10. Oh dear! You see, that's the technical aspect there. That was just doing your marketing for you to have a little thing here, so click here to buy.
No, I don't. I want for people to understand the steps, and if they want to learn how to implement them, they can then take the course.
That's the thing, isn't it? Paying it forward, give something out, get something back.
Yeah.
So let's talk through, because this is one of the trickiest hires in a startup, is the CTO. Because if the CTO especially isn't in the founding team, because Bill and Jane have got a great idea and they go to one of their mates who put some angel money in or pre-seed and sounds awesome, and we've tested it, we've asked them, they've got to bring the CTO. So there's sort of 3 questions, aren't there? What qualities do the CTO have, and understanding the roles. And I think this isn't just the CTO at different stages. I think this happens to the CEO and the CMO and all of the C-suite guys who start this stuff up, because I think they kind of, I'll build the next Facebook and go all the way to the $1 billion IPO. It doesn't happen to many people. And then where to find one and how much to pay them, I guess. So let's start with, like, in your mind, let's take the earlier stages of a business as opposed to hiring the CTO of IBM. What qualities are we looking at?
Well, so just before we talk about the qualities, I think it's really important to understand what you're looking for depending on the stage you're in.
Okay.
So in the beginning stages, when people say, I need a CTO, so you're just coming up with an idea, and people come up to me and they say, Nelly, I need a CTO, or I need a technical co-founder. What they're really asking, or what they're really saying, is that they need a developer who can work for equity to help them build the first version of their product, right? Yeah. And so what they're looking for is a coder. And
you just can't afford them.
Exactly. So they're looking for a coder, and when you're saying in the early stages, the understanding has to be that the title that you give out is a marketing ploy, right? You're giving out the CTO title to entice someone to join your company. But what they are doing, their major job responsibility is coding, very little management, because there's probably no other team members to manage. But as they grow, as the team evolves, then it shifts from coding to management. And once you become the CTO of IBM, then you do know coding or management. You are the visionary.
You probably haven't
right?
touched
So
a keyboard to code for 20 years if you ever get that
yes,
job, right?
yes. So understanding the stages of the CTO, depending on what your company is, will help you figure out what skill set they will need to have.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about, and the things that I will outline now is for the manager CTO, right? So this is not the coder CTO.
We've gone past the MVP. We've got that. We've got something, and now we're going to employ some developers. So what qualities does that person have to have?
Yes. And as in the early stages, when you're just as on a side note, if you're looking for a CTO, you should be looking for all of these qualities as well, because if that person cannot graduate into the role of the next stage CTO, then you will have to have a very difficult conversation with them, because you most likely will have to replace them, or they hire someone above them that they would have to report to. So, be mindful of all of these kind of characteristics or qualities that I'll mention, because you want to be able to find someone who already has those, or is even interested in graduating, because at that point it's going to be very hard for you to transition, right? That's where a lot of founding teams even fall apart, because they have this disagreement on expectations.
It's really hard. I mean, especially when you take like the younger people, right? Have idea, raise pre-seed, call themselves CEO, CMO, CTO, whatever else, get somewhere, get to raise a bit more money, and the investors go, listen, chaps, you're really going somewhere now, but we need some sort of heavier hitters in here. And when you read the horror stories of people being moved sideways, and when they take it badly. And the key thing is here, if your investors going this way, but you're not quite ready, and I'm going to put this great person, you still get your equity, by the way, and you sit there as, customer vision champion, or whatever you get called, you're still there, and actually you've got more chance of success. Because I think that some of the stuff is like when you insist on, I will be the CTO despite my management skills being rubbish, because I was a good enough developer to build the first iteration, right?
Yeah.
That must happen a lot. It
happens a lot, and I think if you're mindful of it from the beginning, you will prevent this problem from happening, because it's a very different, like a developer is very introverted generally. A lot of developers just simply want to write code, and they hate management, right? So you don't want to get that person unless if you're in that situation, it's better to outsource the first version of your product to a development team for hire, right?
Yeah.
Because they're just going to write the code for you, and then continue to search for that high level type person who can then manage the process and the team as the company grows.
And it's not all technical either, is it? I mean, one of my investors, I remember him saying, oh God, it was something along the lines of, one of the problems you'll see later on, Alistair, is that across all areas, right? People come in and they're really good at something. Could be project management, could be product something, could be, and as you get bigger, there's a tendency just to lift them up and put people underneath. And actually, you lose the magic. They were just really good at that, and you should have paid them more to sit there and stay there and have other people go around them.
Right.
And that's the managing of the ego. Like, you're really good at this. We would give you this job, but we're not going to. So we're going to pay you that role just to stay here, because then you share your knowledge with your peers. And that is quite a difficult, brave management thing to do, right?
It's very, very hard, very difficult to, because everybody wants to have a career advancement. And if you're starting at the top as a CTO, there's nowhere to go above, right? If that person cannot rise to that role, the only way to go is down or out.
That's brutalism. You think about it,
right? And that's a very, very hard thing to do, because most people start at the bottom and they earn their way to the top. You cannot get to the top unless you have the
Yes, the whole startup thing is about hyper tracking people to job titles which are like 20 years ahead. And because you can build a thing, and because it can work and it can scale fast, you then get people. What was it? The guy who I did the first ever work with in '99, he used to say people rise to the point of their own incompetence. Right? Are they effectively incompetent? When they get to incompetent, and the people go, why are they there in that job? And that's when they've gone too far.
Right.
It's quite blunt. There wasn't kind of, we'll train you up beyond that. I was like, no, that's the bit where you're just like never going to get past. Move. But that's a particular type of management style. It probably isn't au fait in 2020.
Yeah,
Oh no,
probably.
I think you've got a bit of it in the US, but let's not go there. One particular manager who perhaps does exactly act just like that. So, we're not. By the way, it's US election results day, so we're not discussing that because it's.
We are not going to go there.
We're not going to go there because I live. I don't know how many. You're in New York, right? So I'm however many thousands of miles away. It doesn't really bother me because it doesn't affect me. It really doesn't. I know people get all upset over here, right? And it's been on for weeks, right? You know, and just out of interest, because I have to ask, we must come back to the CTO thing, but just out of interest, do you know the name of our Prime Minister? You see what I mean?
No.
I have to take 5 weeks of the US election. You can't even tell me what the name of the UK Prime Minister. Why have we got this obsession?
Because he's actually not. I mean, let's not even go there.
Let's not go there.
Let's not talk politics.
No. But it is amazing because there's like I can hear it downstairs, right? It's got constant. And you're thinking, what I'd like to know is what the weather's going to be tomorrow so I can walk the dogs. But I'm a heathen, so let's not go there. Ching, 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 ching. Okay, so we're now sort of slight diversion just to set the scene of the date. We're talking about the role of the CTO in all the different stages of the startup. And really, we've covered it's the developer really to build an MVP. Then you get a bit higher up from that. And then you need to employ some developers. So then you need someone who can actually manage developers and obviously people. And then you're kind of going beyond that to a strategy point, I guess, as you kind of go up this escalator of success. And then you're getting to a CTO who's sitting at the top table saying, this is the technical strategy and why we should do this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what does that person look like? Because how do you see the shape and the I'd say almost like the communication skills of that person to explain to non-technical people what they're talking about?
Well, the first thing, I mean, communication is huge. If they have to be able to, they're responsible for translating business logic into technology, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have to be able to communicate both to very technical people who are the developers and totally non-technical people. And this ability to speak very technical terms in non-technical language in a way that's not demeaning. Yeah. Right. That's the power of a CTO. You have to be able to get down to the level of the person you're talking to, not assume that they understand all of the stuff you're saying, and not talking in jargon and all that, because that's very disrespectful in my mind. I experienced a little bit of that early in my career when I wasn't as in fact, I was still in school studying computer science, and I was volunteering at this company, and the developer that I worked with just did this on a daily basis to me, so I know exactly how it feels. Yeah. And I think that really defined my CTO career right there, because I vowed to myself that I would never do that to anyone. So to be able to do it in an empowering way is I think is really key for a good CTO to have. And they also have to have the knowledge, like a very diverse knowledge of technology. The difference between a CTO and a developer is a developer has a finite set of skills that they're an expert in. And the CTO's responsibility is really to understand the technology ecosystem and the pros and cons of a lot of different tools and technologies, because they're going to be responsible for helping you understand what is the right tool to pick for different parts of whatever your business requires, right? And so that's a big distinction between the two. They have to know what's coming up also. So learning, I was going to say, is future gaze, the stargaze. Future trends and understanding what's happening and what's coming around, and how can you take advantage of that? Because if you can jump on different trends and different things that are happening in the market and already be prepared for it in whatever software that you're in, that's going to give you a huge advantage, right? But
without being a magpie, right? Shiny.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want to get into, we have to adopt into every single shiny object. Right? The CTO's role is to really understand both the business and the technology and make the decision for both, the best decision for both of those. It's never, we're going to just adopt this technology for no reason, because they're now in a C-level executive, right? They're thinking about the business
and the spending, because like tech stuff
right?
gets expensive, yeah.
Because they are given a budget, they are given certain responsibilities, so they're not thinking of, I got to get my hands on this shiny tool, which is what most developers like. They get excited about trying out new technology so they can write code with it or whatever. To the CTO's mindset is very different. They think about the bigger picture and how technology can be used to benefit the business and grow it.
And not randomly do it. We had a guy who, lovely guy, but we built the front end in React, and he thought, yeah, but Preact better. Right? And then, of course, a month later, I was down at the office. He said, "No, we've gone back to React." I was like, "That's a waste of time and money. How long did that take?"
Right.
Well, if we got it right, then we'd have got 0.1 seconds off the time to paint. So obviously, me being like as you just said, like time to paint. So first of all, I was fobbed off with the confusing thing that Alistair might not understand, and then you find out it's like time 0.1 of a second to get the why. Because there's nobody there yet. It's a startup, right? And that's when you have shiny magpie syndrome. Well, that's going to be way better. Get it in, lots of work. Isn't that much better? Actually, because there's these problems, and then back to the old one. Right, so you just wasted that dev cycle. You wasted some money. And even if it had worked, the customers wouldn't have noticed.
Exactly. Which is why in the early days, if you don't have a CTO, you just have a developer, the responsibility for the business side of things, the customer-centric side of things, has to fall to either you as the founder or a product manager that you have to put in place, and that's going to be their responsibility to really keep the developers in place and give them the knowledge that they need. Because oftentimes, it's really important to get the right type of developer we talk about hiring for DNA and values and qualities and all that. If your goal is to build customer-centric apps and your developer is only interested in the next shiny object, there's never going to be a good fit, right? They're always going to be miserable in their job. That developer who has that DNA quality should go work for some kind of experimental lab at Google, where they are always experimenting with new technology.
Yeah, shiny every day.
Right. But not necessarily in the startup, because once you pick something, you have to kind of stick with it. You made a decision to do that, and it may not be as exciting as trying out new things, but that's what the business requires, and so you have to be okay with it.
Okay. So now we know what we're looking for. So let's just mythical startup, and I guess this depends where you are in which location wise. But let's just say, like, how do a couple of young founders go out and actually they get to the first stage, they've built an MVP, they've got to convince somebody to come in as a CTO. I mean, there's so much demand for good CTOs, I would just imagine they're all gone, and you have to pinch them from somebody else, right? Is that the best way?
Well, because there's so much demand, what I actually have a saying that you don't find a CTO, you have to earn one.
Ooh, good. I like that's going to go in the show notes. That is the headline of this.
You really have to earn one, because you have to realize that a good technical person who is okay with taking a risk of working in a startup, they don't need an idea person. They probably have their own idea that they're working on, right?
Always.
So
the side hustle.
So there's always a side hustle. And it's because they can just simply build their own ideas, they're not interested in an idea person. So what you have to realize that with that reality, that you can't get those people. You have to now go after the other developers, the other great developers who don't have a problem finding a job in this environment. They're getting paid top dollar. They are getting everything they want from every single company, right? So they are in high demand. Okay. At the same time, lots of startups fail in their first year. So there's a lot of risk, right? So one thing that I encourage non-technical founders to do is to try to figure out how to de-risk that opportunity for them. The time investment and the cost opportunity that they have to take. And the way to de-risk it is by validating your idea, which will show that it's not just an idea, that it has legs, right? Yep. That's number one. Number two, building a prototype. Because you're now refining it. You've gotten the first step to actually showing it to customers. You got them excited. Number three, you have to build a following. This is where you can start to build a community and a following on social media, build an email list. This will again show that you're not just an idea person, that you are a marketer, and then you can get your customers to get around the idea, right? So you're now showcasing your skills as a business person, and that you're not just an idea person, which is the biggest problem that people pitching developers, like, we just need somebody to help me code this thing, right? But what can you do? This is a way to show them. And number three, put some money to build the MVP. Of your own money, because that shows that you're committed, you have skin in the game, and that you will you will implement this idea no matter what, whether this person is online with you or not.
Conviction and validation, right? I've proved it's going to work, and I'm going to do it. And I put some money in, and it's almost like if you don't join, right, you're going to miss out.
Exactly,
it's a bit of FOMO.
And here's the thing: from an entrepreneur's perspective, you're doing two things. You are, because you validate the idea, so you know you're headed in the right direction. You're only building the MVP, so it's a small version of the product, which will take you 2 to 3 months to build maximum. It should. If it takes longer, then you're building way too much, right? And then in 2 to 3 months, you can then show some traction to somebody, and the conversation changes from "I need you" to "Here's a great opportunity." Do you see how it completely changes the game and the conversation? And so if you take those steps, and you can actually, you have to have a process. You have to know how to manage the developer that you're going to hire. So don't do it in a way, like, if you don't know the process, figure out how to do it in a way that you're not going to spend thousands of dollars trying to build your MVP. If you do it correctly, you can very cost efficiently develop your MVP, so that by the time you are talking to potential CTOs or co-founders, you are at a much better standing on all different levels. Yeah. For them to say yes to you. And by the way, this is also something that you need to do for investors as well. If you can show them traction, it's so much easier to raise money. So it will help you build a team, and it will also help you raise money if that's what you want to do. And then two things you're going to do in parallel. So you know that it takes, to find a really good quality CTO or a co-founder, technical co-founder, it's going to take you 6 months plus. It takes time. So don't settle for anybody. Just know that it takes time. You have to interview them. You have to make sure that they match your DNA, your company DNA, that all the skill sets, the high-level skill sets that we talked about. And that can take time. So parallel to that, as you're looking, and you have your search going, and we'll get into that in a second, you're going to de-risk the opportunity for them by validating the idea and building your prototype. And the best way to meet CTOs and technical people, in my mind, yes, you can post the job on a job board, you can go to your network and all that. But to me, the best place to do that is by going to technical meetups, by actually getting ingrained in a community and building relationships with technical people. And I know this is very intimidating for a non-technical person to go into a room full of nerds, but it's if you do it in a proper way, you're there to listen, you're there to learn, and then when you're comfortable, speak. Then you start to actually be in an environment where people start to respect you, to then have meaningful conversations with you. And so you should never appear needy. You should never pitch your idea and tell people to join your startup when you meet them. It's like asking someone to marry you when you just met them.
It's like going on one of these sort of speed dating things, but no, it's
exactly right.
But you go I can almost visualize what you're saying, because I've been to a couple of technical kind of meetups and sat there going, what are they talking about? But actually, the conversations are actually interesting once you get away from the fact that we're talking about whatever technical thing that I don't understand. And then you get these really great conversations with people, and they tell you all about the things they're doing, and it's all very exciting, and you listen to them, and then they say, what do you do? And you say, well, I'm building this thing over here. It's going to be the biggest car search engine in the world. And they go, wow. You go, yeah, and this guy, put some money in. Wow. And then, of course, like you say, it's valid. You've done the validation at that point, right? So now it's, oh, that's quite... And then I think also listening between the lines, what you're saying is, the other key thing here is it's got to be interesting. It's got to be I don't really just want to make a slightly better mouse or a slightly better version of something. What are you doing that's actually going to intellectually stimulate me to want me to get the hours in to get your product going? Because it isn't just about, we've got some customers.
That's where the validation comes from. Because if you can show that there are people interested in this thing, they're willing to pay money for it, that they're going to be using it, that in itself is exciting to hear, rather than, oh, I have this idea and you know nothing about it, right? It's like, it's when something is in idea phase, it's so abstract that it's really hard to get behind it. But once you start to see traction, once you start to show that there's...
You can just make it real. Here's a thing, it looks like this.
This is a real thing. I just need... the conversation becomes, look what I was able to do without you. Imagine what we can do together. Imagine how much faster we can move. It's a very empowering position to be in. And so as you're doing these things in parallel and you're starting to have conversations with technical people and you're starting to see traction at the same time. So hopefully by the time you find your CTO or co-founder, you've already validated and build your minimal viable product. And it's going to be very easy for them to just say yes. And you're not spinning your wheels, because I know so many
conversation about money, right? You've done all the other stuff, so now it's really down to the money, equity, or whatever, right?
Yeah. And if you've already have a product, you don't have to give as much equity because you've learned so much in that process. You already know you don't really need that person, right? You're in a much better position from a power standpoint and a conversation standpoint to then give away less of your company, both to investors and potential partners.
Yeah, one of the things I've got on my list actually for the next one is, I'm speaking to Blackboard. One of the things I've got on my list for the next one is actually take more time in hiring. Like, just, we need, and also we had a couple of issues of where we were located, but if you need to move to get the people. If the whole problem's been solved now, it's fabulous. And then take your time, right? The temptation of, I think one of the mistakes I made was sprint, go. And I think back now, I think, I should have just gone slower, spent less, got less people, taken more time, matured the product, had a better feel, and just, and somebody said to me, well, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And at the time I was like, yeah, you've got to go as fast as possible, beat everybody else. And it's just not true, right? Because the other people think everyone's going to copy their great idea. What they don't realize, of course, is 99% people think their idea is shit. Otherwise, every investor would be standing outside your door going, here's $10 million, right? They don't do that. So not everyone thinks your idea is that good. But if you've got a bit of validation and customers and a few quid from an investor, you can take your time with the best people. I think that's a kind of magical mixing device there, because you don't get otherwise. There's something I'd like to ask you about as well. And I think this is the funniest thing I've read in such a long time. It's so true. I'm just going to quote you on this, right? If you don't want me to talk about this, do it. You were sent a video about a smart toothbrush with intelligent Bluetooth technology. It records your teeth brushing data. It records your teeth brushing data so you can chart and share, which is weird. You can choose to moderately clean or super clean your teeth. And you were just wondering, this is in a written thing you wrote down, I'm just wondering, who is going to moderately clean your teeth? I mean, I'm all for great oral hygiene, but really, that is the problem with so much tech now, isn't it? I know we've gone off the CTO thing, but I think that's the funniest thing I read all day. It's so true. Like, it happens in cars, like a lot, right? Here's a useless widget. There's one on my Golf. I just got a Golf, right? And it's like you've got a slidey screen now. So I'm almost crashing every day because I can't concentrate on the screen. I don't know how many drives a Tesla. And it's got like a 400 colors I can choose for the LED lighting. Whoever wanted 400 colors? And who said, I tell you what we need to do, guys, we need to spend an extra £7 per car on a 400 quid LED lighting device thing. I think
that as a small startup, keeping your product simple, keeping your product
100%. Yes.
and usable is going to be at a huge advantage because of all the different things that you just mentioned. I mean, the companies that come up with these ridiculous products.
We should make a toothbrush. You and I should make a toothbrush as a gimmick. Right? We'll sell a gimmick that only just does enough, right? This toothbrush has awesome and rubbish, right? And you can choose how. I mean, it's just insane. Somebody thought like moderately clean. I guess maybe you could have some gum problems or something. Maybe that's what it means. Right. But we should have a list of all that kind of stuff, right? Because I'm sure there must be people who do this all the time. I don't know if you've seen like on Instagram, right? If Instagram is my favorite place for technology products now, which are shit, and to be fair though, I have bought one. Right, and whatever you're interested in, if it's yoga or cycling or whatever it is that you're interested in, you'll always see these ads for the stuff that you order and it comes 6 weeks later because it has to come from. This one's actually quite good, right? So this one, ruins your green screen. If you break, it gets brighter. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Battery runs out in 4 minutes.
There you go. Very useful.
Very useful. Yeah, but I do love your toothbrush one. So how would you like to finish off? I think for the now 250 subscribers, by the way, when you agreed to come on, it was 150, right? I'll give all of that credit to you. Not my advertising whatsoever. How would you like to finish off? I think it's been a great walkthrough, how you would look for, I think that we should definitely the 1 to 10 list should be absolutely in the show notes. That's going to be, I think for a lot of people, that's a really great thing just to stick on the wall and go, remember Nelly's 1 to 10, right? I think you should call it Nelly's 1 to 10 and print out, laminate it. What closing discussions do you think just around that whole CTO piece? What are the most important points for you in doing that?
I think becoming. Let's see. So we talked a lot about getting into a power position.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we can close on that and just tell people that you really need to get educated about the process, about being tech literate and being a part of the conversation, and trying to de-risk every single part of your business in very methodical ways.
Yeah, so we have our 10 steps to getting started, and then we'll have the sort of three reasons and how you choose a CTO and at what stages. And the key thing really for founders, what you're saying is, and this is what your TechSpeak for Entrepreneurs course is about. You're a non-technical founder. You get this right, you can keep more of your company. You can attract a better CTO, and in the end, if you do both of these things, you'll have a better result.
Absolutely, without losing a ton of money in the process.
Which is always helpful, right? And yeah. So how can is TechSpeak for Entrepreneurs, is it global? Can entrepreneurs from is it a global online kind of teaching course, and how does it work?
So it used to be an in-person boot camp before COVID. I used to teach it over a weekend in boot camp style for 16 hours straight.
Your audience has just gone up by 5.999 billion people, right?
Exactly. So I'm actually really excited about this because so many people have been displaced by COVID. And I think getting into software is such an exciting opportunity if you know what you're doing. Lots of entrepreneurs are positioned to have the domain expertise to actually, if they look for problems within the environment and the industry that they're in, no matter whether it's a technical industry or not, there's a lot of opportunity to solve problems, and technology and software is a great way to do that. Definitely. It's awesome for remote work and remote teams, and now anyone can hire anybody from across the world. I mean, you could before, but now it's more acceptable, right?
It's weird, isn't it? It's like it hasn't changed, but somehow
nothing has really changed. But I think software lends itself to that, and totally. I'm excited about people jumping on the software bandwagon and solving real problems and becoming entrepreneurs, and I'm here to empower them to prevent them from making all of the mistakes and spending the time and the resources that are required to and wasted if you don't do it properly.
You have a number one fan here. If I'd met you 10 years ago, I would have saved myself all this grey hair. And I think what you do is fantastic. And I love the fact that you did boot camps like for real, in real live boot camps. And now anyone who's listening to this anywhere in the world can go, I want to learn that and join. And and that's TechSpeak for Entrepreneurs, and all the usual links will be in the show notes, and I'll put them on the screen. And I recommend it. Having done all the mistakes that you've talked about and made every single one of them, I think your course is fabulous. And thank you so much for coming on Confounded TV.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Great fun. Thank you.